All right, sorry, it took a while to find the recording. So thanks for joining us today. We are really lucky. I know we've got some clients, we've got some referral partners and teammates on the call today. Casey Granston is one of my longest running mortgage lending partners, and Casey has become just kind of like one of the guys that you need to talk to if you're talking mortgage business in the Northwest. He's an amazing person, a really good friend of mine. I feel fortunate that Casey was introduced to me by Brandon, who's on our team a long time ago. But Casey's evolved into somebody that is just in the know in the mortgage business. And I think there's a lot of questions right now on what's happening in our real estate market, what's happening in the mortgage markets. Rates are obviously higher than they were. So we're really lucky to have Casey spending a little bit of time with us today. I mean, he's one of the gurus. So Casey, thank you for joining us today. I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me. What a nice intro. Probably better than I am, but I appreciate that there. Yeah. The reason, I mean, Nick, we talk about this, we've been talking about this all year, right? And even last year and stuff like that. And so, what we've done over the last couple months is bring in a couple different economists to speak on what the market looks like, what does 2022, 2023, 2024 even look like in our area? Because I think there's so much misinformation out there, right? Like when someone goes to buy, right, our reticular activating system, right, it's going to put it on the forefront of everything we see. So every article, every news article, all these kind of things, right? And the media more or less is going to portray the fear, right? So they're going to take little bits of pieces, little bits of data points to show, hey, there is a housing crash. This isn't a great time to buy, these kind of things, because they want clicks on their on their articles. It's not like, oh, this is still a good time to buy. That's not going to get a lot of clicks and these kind of things. So I think it's just the biggest thing is this is just to educate, clients and more people on what it looks like. So if they are ready to buy, if they are ready to move into the market, then they have the understanding. Then again, kind of talking with, a parent, mom or dad, oh, it was a recession, don't buy, this kind of stuff. So yeah, why don't we get into kind of the first slide here?
Yeah, and I think, Casey, you hit the nail on the head. Like, there's a lot of fear. Guys, if you're listening and you're not in our seats, like, we're the boots on the ground, look at what's happening in the market. What are people saying? What are we actually seeing? That sort of stuff. But there's a lot of fear, but you have to remember that the headline fear is based on statistics that came out usually 30 days ago, which is based on activity that happened 30 days prior to that. So there's always a lag between activity and the headlines. And what we tend to see is usually trending a little bit further down than the headlines actually show. So that's the purpose of this call today. And Casey's going to walk us through some of the nuts and bolts of what's happening with the mortgage market and how inflation is impacting the mortgage market. So I'm going to let you jump in, Casey, and just let me know when you need me to advance, okay?
Yeah, cool. Yeah, so first, a very hot button topic, inflation, right? A lot of people don't know what inflation is, don't understand inflation. So inflation is actually a 12-month running average. Basically, it's month by month, and then they take this cumulative effect of a number, right? And as you can see on the board right here, we're at 8.5%. Last month was 9.1%, right? That's the highest inflation number we're coming up on 45 years, right? And inflation is basically like kryptonite in the mortgage industry, right? For mortgage-backed securities and treasuries. Like as the cost of goods go up, people are going to flood out of the bond market, out of the treasuries, which is the biggest key for interest rates, right? And so as they flood out, as cost of goods go up, interest rates are going to go up with that, right? And so, it's the definition of inflation, the general increase in the price of goods and services in the economy, right? The Federal Reserve, when they look at the inflation number, they look at and try to target around a 2% inflation rate for the year, right? As you can see, 8.5, 9.1, everyone's seeing it. Everyone's feeling it. Gas prices, groceries, your coffee, right? I think it's like it went up $1 when I go get my latte, right? Now it's like, okay, maybe I'm not getting vanilla in it this time, right? To save that extra dollar. 2022, we're looking at again, supply shortages, chips, energies, COVID, right? Strong consumer demand for all this kind of stuff. And that's what's driving this. Our government put so much money into it. And you can see from October of last year, 5.3 to 8.5, we can kind of hit to the next slide here too. And as you can see, the 5-year trend on inflation, from 17 really into 2021, you saw it at about this 2% clip, right? A little dip right at the start of COVID, kind of took it down to 0. And then from there, it's just been, kind of slowly going up. What, the thing about inflation, the thing about these kind of stuff, like the Federal Reserve, they are going to monitor this and try to help as much as they can. Some of it is really a lot of this is really put on their shoulders, right? They should have raised rates back in November of last year, but they waited, until this year, until it got too far along, I guess, if you will, where inflation was, and got out of control, right? It shouldn't have got to this point, but again, that's where we're at. So, what we look at these kind of things is that, how does the Fed control inflation, right? So that's one of their main things they do, is try to control inflation. And, they're going to raise rates, and what that's going to do is slow the economy and bring inflation down. So it's kind of one of those catch-22s, is like, as inflation goes up and they want to bring it down, they're doing that to actually slow down the economy, to bring these interest rates back down and bring kind of the cost of goods down. So what we see there, we'll kind of pop to the next slide here with the Federal Reserve a little bit. The Federal Reserve is a very important and one of the most, like, I think, misunderstood groups, right? Because every time, they raise rates or do something with rates, I get 10 emails. Oh, my rate's going up. Oh my gosh, my rate's going up, as they raise their rates 50 basis points, 25, 75. And it's actually totally different, right? So the Federal Reserve, they are more on like daily interest rate of money, like what the banks are doing, the overnight cost of money, right? And so like HELOCs, your second mortgages, your credit cards, your car loans, that's what, when they raise those rates, that's what the rates are. So when they raise their rates, again, the Reserve is going to encourage banks and other lenders to raise their rates and loans to siphon more of the money, to basically like a no risk, more or less a no risk fee, with the Fed. So it's how the supply of money goes with what they're doing, right? And so how it then kind of comes back full circle into the mortgage industry is more in the Fed minutes. And so that's their conversations that they have. The Fed meets 8 times a year, and it's what they talk about and what they're projecting into the economy. So after the Fed raises their rates or whatever, and then they go and you see Powell talking to the media, you'll see the mortgage spikes up and down, because if he's talking about inflation, he's talking about what they think for interest rates, what they think for economy, what they think for all these kind of things that they start chatting. It's how the market digests what they think, and then they're projecting out what it's going to do to interest rates. So kind of a complicated topic in that it's not just a 1-to-1 ratio in that kind of thing. And so that's kind of what they look at in all that kind of stuff.
So when you said you get people calling you when there's talk of the Fed raising the rate, are these people that are in the process with you? Are these people that have originated mortgages previously? Because I think that's one of the things, and guys, look, if you aren't clear on the process, that's okay. We're just here to say we understand this process a little bit better, and we can help answer questions to guide you the right way, right? But I mean, who's calling you and getting those questions asked there?
I mean, it's clients that got a mortgage 4 years ago. It's people in the process. It's people we locked, right? It's across the board, and it's everybody.
Yeah.
Again, a lot of this stuff that we're talking about, inflation, federal funds rate, the Federal Reserve, we're not taught this in school. We're not taught what they do. A lot of mortgage brokers aren't even taught this, right? Right. And so,
right.
When the Federal, the Reserve, they're raising these rates, they're doing these kind of things. We take it as like, oh my gosh, this is a bad thing. This is a bad thing. In reality, what they're doing right now is help to save interest rates and save, quote unquote, save the mortgage industry and the housing industry. Because if they don't, and they don't raise rates, and they don't do these things on the daily cost of money, it's going to get out of control, and you're going to see very big,
correct
stuff.
Correct.
So, going into like this slide here, right? Interest rates over the last, 20 years. I mean, Again, the average interest rate over all time is like it's like 8.2%, right? And now we're in 5.5%, 6% right now, and people are like, they can't wrap their minds around how bad of a rate this is. But in general, in the long term of things, it's actually lower than what the average over the lifetime is.
Right. I think we bought our first house at 5.25. We bought our most recent house at 4.5. We were luckily able to refinance at some point because the rates took such a dip, but this is not shocking territory, right?
Right. And so you see this downward trend of interest rates, and we're 2 years were 2%, right? And the reason for that was the Fed was buying mortgage-backed securities, buying treasuries, and pushing down the rates and the cost of homes, more or less, right, to help inflate these numbers, right? And so now you're seeing the fallout of what they did, because they're getting out of the buying of the mortgage-backed securities, and it was trillions of dollars,
Correct.
daily billions, right, that they were buying. So now they're trying to naturally pull this out, which we've talked a lot about. It's actually kind of making it a normal market in the housing, which we'll talk more about. But these two next slides are going to be the biggest thing that we're going to talk about here, I think, on the call today. Right. And so these bars, right, these gray bars as you go through are recessions, right? And the reality, we're in a recession right now. No matter what the government, the Fed says we're in a recession, they're probably not gonna. And it's usually, you don't really know the actual if you're in a recession for a year and a half later. But in all of these, out of the last 7 recessions, 6 housing prices have gone up and interest rates have gone down. The only one that didn't was 2008, which is the last big recession we had. Everybody's, it's in the forefront of their mind. Again, when you talk to your parents, like, don't buy, we're in a recession. Remember, housing, collapsed back then, right? And the problem with that is that it was caused by the mortgage industry,
Right.
like greedy banks trying to make more money and being negligible on what they were trying to do.
Correct.
Right. And so what we're seeing and what we're forecasting is that this recession we're in, you're going to see rates come down because of what we talked about with inflation and what the Fed Reserve is doing on raising rates, right? Q4 to next year, we're going to see rates come down, right? And housing prices is going to continue to go up. I mean, I know you're going to get that and further, but I mean, when you look at this, is anywhere from, depending on the economist you're talking to, is 5 to 12% of gain in 2023 and 2024, right? We gained almost all of our equity in the first 2 months of the first quarter of this year.
Right.
Right. And you can speak to that of what that does and how that kind of slides down.
Yeah, I mean, depending on the market, we'll address this on some later slides, but depending on the market, we saw increases of 12 to 15% in the first quarter of this year alone. And we looked at 2021 as a banner year, and 2020 is a year that came out of nowhere. Reality was, as we all got kind of shuttered in our homes, one of the ways to prop the economy up was to lower the interest rates on home mortgages, which allowed for people to gain equity, sometimes even if they weren't working, right? There was a little bit of a boost to the economy in the housing sector there. There was not exactly a natural boost. So a little correction, especially after the way that we skyrocketed at the start of this year, which we did not expect. We were ready for things to slow down, but the rates were still low. So buyers were trying to gobble up the rates. I mean, really their budget was stretched further and further because the rates were so low. And now it's starting to correct a little bit to what should be a little bit more natural. I agree 100%.
Yeah. I mean, right, this is where we're still having issues, right? When you look at again, in the crash, new home builds, this kind of stuff, there just still isn't enough inventory. We're still short inventory. And especially in our area, right? Like the Seattle and then now surrounding areas down Tacoma, North, Snohomish, Pierce, King County, right? With Amazon and these kind of things. I mean, Tacoma and Seattle have been either 1 or 2, in the last 7 years of fastest growing cities, right? I think Seattle slipped down, maybe top 10, and Tacoma's moved up, right? And so those people, as these cities grow and these continues to grow, there's just a supply shortage, and that's the whole thing. Is yeah, there's people on the sidelines, but you're landlocked everywhere you go. It's not like Arizona, you can just build a new community.
Correct. And it's a supply and demand issue. And so, I mean, in Casey, this slide speaks to, in the Great Recession, I mean, there were builders and developers that I know personally that were just wiped out. I mean, completely wiped out. So you want to see the boots on the ground perspective of this whole thing, right? I mean, what does that mean? That means that people that were overextended and over leveraged and building houses. There was a 400 home development in my hometown of Mount Vernon that was just shuttered. You know, there were townhome projects all over Tacoma that were just shuttered and sitting half completed, right? And the ones that were completed, they were literally giving them away. Because of that, developers and builders have gotten really cautious. And if you talk to them, it's not a matter of, in their mind, if, but when there's going to be a problem in the marketplace. And the great irony for me is because they have that perspective, they're not building enough homes to oversaturate the marketplace. So they're not building enough homes to create the supply that we need because they're cautious. They don't want to get caught up again, you know, and rightfully so. And I actually was looking at some stats the last, I think in July, new home builds were down again, you know, for the first time since something like 2016. So builders and developers are pulling back because they don't want to get stuck holding the bag because of the way that they're leveraged. But we need that inventory in the market, and we don't have it. We haven't had it for a long time. You know, since I've been in real estate, you know, the inventory has been slowly trickling downward in our region. You know, over the last 10 years or so, we've gotten down to the point where traditionally there's between 1 and 2 months of inventory, and that just is what it is. You know, and we'll talk about kind of the inventory issues there. But again, one of the things I think that you have to think about when you're looking at real estate too is we get fed articles that are on a national level. So these articles that are the clickbait in our world, right? I mean, they're talking about the national housing market, but the housing market is different in every single region. You know, so like I've got friends who sell in Arizona, I've got friends who sell in Texas, New York, and in Washington. If you look at our employers, the housing market is tied to our employers in the area. We've got some massive employers, you know, Amazon, Microsoft, I mean, are kind of king of the hill, right? And they are paying their employees really, really well. Their employees want to buy houses, so there's not enough for them to buy, which is what's kind of propping up our region too, even with some of the rise in the interest rates. So one of the things that we look at when we're talking about the real estate market and any market in general is supply and demand, right? And so supply and demand is strictly how many houses are available. And the last slide spoke to specifically how many new homes are being built, which is a part of our supply chain, but we also have existing homes that are built that are turning over as the real estate and inventory. So when we're looking at our marketplace, it's how many houses are available and how many people actually want to buy a home, you know, and millennials were looked at as the generation that was not going to buy, right, Case? I mean, that was the scoop. And so you see that big downturn in new home starts, that was the data. They're not going to buy, they're going to rent, they're going to have different arrangements. That's not been the case, right? So they've, that generation has really stepped forward into the market, and there's not enough. So when we look at the real estate market in general to try to determine whether it's a good market to buy or sell, and we're trying to decide, is this a balanced market, right? And so a balanced market is when the supply and the demand are equal or relatively equal. And usually we're talking about balance with anywhere between 5 to 7 months of supply. So that means that it would take between 5 to 7 months for all of the supply to sell out with all of the buyers that are in the marketplace. This area has not been a balanced market since I can remember. You know, when I started selling homes about 12 years ago, there was an abundance of supply. Like there were homes available, and sellers were trying to figure out what they could do to sell them. The last 4 or 5 years specifically, we have been in a seller's market, and it's been very similar in each of those years. So I kind of look at it like, you know, we had this crazy run up with COVID, and then because the market was very strong pre-COVID, right? Like the real estate market was probably at about 2 months of inventory pre-COVID. And then when we were all told to go home, I thought the real estate market was going to see some crazy disruption. What actually happened is our homes were never more valuable to us. We had time. I don't think people were always working when they're on these Zooms. I think people were perusing active inventory. They wanted to get out of the house. Around here, one of the ways you could get out of the house is you could go look at other people's houses. But people started evaluating whether or not my house makes sense. So we saw this great reshuffling, and with low interest rates, that started to drive the prices up because the inventory was getting lower. If you look back a year ago, July 2021, this stat shocked me when we were doing our research, actually. July 2021, we ticked up to about 1 month of inventory. The guys that are on our team remember this time of year last year, we had some really great houses that were sitting on the market for 30, 45 days. And we were kind of looking at each other like, what's going on? I would live in that house in a heartbeat. It's just sitting on the market. Why isn't anybody buying it, right? It was kind of like this feeling of, well, this is the end of the run. And the reality was, our market in the Northwest is very seasonal. I think other markets are seasonal as well, but we tend to have the lowest inventory in the late winter, early spring. Our inventory tends to jump up in the spring and we sell out of it in the summer, and then it gets a little sluggish. So as you can see, it was very normal that we had a month of inventory in July of last year. If you look at July 2022, we're only up to 1.9 months of inventory. And so a balanced market, again, is between 5 and 7 months. We only have about 2 months of inventory in the marketplace right now. And so we are still weighted statistically towards the sellers in this market. And what we're seeing is the reasonable sellers that are pricing their house appropriately for the market are selling their homes relatively quickly. And that's about, 2 to 3 weeks typically. But the housing supply was extremely low in January and February around here. I mean, like 1 or 2 weeks of inventory, meaning that there's virtually nothing available. And so that's why it feels a little bit different now, because we've gone from 1 to 2 weeks to almost 2 months.
And what's like, this is what the media will do here. This is a perfect example of how they'll use stats to get you to click on the article, right? 1 month a year, in July of 2021, 1 month of inventory to 1.9 in 2022. That article right there, there's 50% more inventory, housing starting to crash. That will be an article, and it's going from 1 month to 1.9, and it's still not even close to a balanced market. But they'll use that article, and then they'll be in the data, and then they'll actually there'll be like a little 2-sentence that gives you the actual data, and the peer is fluff. So you click on the article, and then they get paid, right?
I read an article this morning that said that we have seen the biggest decline in the housing market in 1 month since 2011. And it was a 0.9% decline in the housing market. And while that can be dramatic, because over the course of a year, that might add up to about 12%, right? We also just appreciated 15% in 2.5, 3 months. So it only makes sense that some of that appreciation is going to go away. And by the way, that was after a 2-year window of appreciation of nearly 40%, right? So the housing market just went bananas, and we've given away about 1% of the appreciation over 1 month. And the article that comes out is just strictly the market decline is the greatest since 2011. You have to look at this with a global perspective. And the reason why we're doing this, friends, is because when you're trying to figure out what makes the most sense, it's really about what makes the most sense for you. I mean, I was talking this morning with our team. There's a buyer that should be taking advantage of any marketplace, The marketplace right now, with a little bit more inventory and sellers that are a little bit skittish, is prime for people that are selling their house and moving up into a new house. It's the ideal market for them.
Hey, Nick.
A little bit higher, but they have equity and they can afford to take on some of that because they've got somebody where they can buy the rate down. They're probably gainfully employed. They're financing less money. So I think it's important to note that, in the housing market, there are different opportunities for different buyers and different sellers. And it might not always be the right market for you to play in. Generally speaking, if you're going to buy a house and live in it for 10 years, you're going to end up in a better spot than where you started, though.
Okay, Nick.
Yeah, Sean.
Hey, you mind if I share a little insight on that? Because I think about that all the time. I'm in Dallas-Fort Worth. I know Nick. He's helping me move a property for me out there in Lakewood, and doing a great job. Thank you, Nick. I appreciate what you're doing. As far as the time to buy and sell, it's exactly what you said. You buy and sell when it's good for your family, unless there's other extraordinary circumstances. because, at any time owning real estate is generally a better option than not owning real estate. And if you need to buy and it's on a buy high side, generally real estate does not depreciate generally. Now, there was the exception when the mortgage crash and all that's happened, 08, 09. And, I was selling real estate during that time, myself. And it was real hard. I couldn't give houses away, right? I mean, I would contract with a buyer agent. It was so bad, as the listing agent. But, that's one of those unusual times. Over time, real estate almost always makes money, especially if you've got rental properties and you've got other asset building opportunities. Very good to be in real estate. It's generally not ever a bad time to buy. You sell and you buy when you need to and move forward.
Yeah, I mean, I can't agree more. And it's not that we have a vested interest. It's just that when you take a peel back and you look at the big picture perspective, like Casey was talking about, we tend to remember the most recent event, right? And so, the Great Recession was caused by real estate. And is it likely that the next recession is going to be caused by real estate? I don't think so. And is it likely that real estate is going to take a major hit? Real estate has to correct a little bit so that we can get healthy again. And then, like Casey's saying, all of the outlets that I read and my financial advisor friends, my economist friends, they are all talking about the traction that they expect to see over the next 3 to 5 years in this area. And even with the Great Recession, there were some markets that were hit like 30, 40%, like the 30, 40% decline in home values in certain markets. But I was selling houses then, and now in 2022, that was 10, 11, 12. Generally speaking, we think the bottom peaked out around here in 12. Well, here we are in 2022, and I bought a house in 2012, and it bottomed out worth about 185, 186. Before that, it was worth about 300,000. It just sold for 550,000. So that 10-year window, even with the Great Recession, the marketplace here still corrected well beyond what it would have been like if a property owner was not in the market. So this slide talks a little bit more about supply and demand historically too. And one of the things we look at again is the inventory available. What it shows is the increase in percentage of inventory available. And I thought this was really a great slide to illustrate what we've seen this summer. You can see, generally speaking, going back into 2018, oops, hit the wrong button. Going back into 2018, we might, in this line, it shows that, there's a small amount of inventory, like a 10% increase in inventory, and then a 25% decrease in inventory. So you can see we keep kind of hovering around an increase in inventory and selling out of it, and then an increase in inventory and selling out of it. And that's the trend in our market, right? So in the spring, which is when we see our increases in inventory traditionally, we had an increase of inventory because it was spring. And then the rates went up, and a lot of our sellers were sitting on the sidelines that had literally been telling us they don't have to sell. Which, if that was you, no harm, no foul, because you don't know what you don't know. But we were banging the drum like, if you want to take advantage of this market, you got to go now. And what happened is, as soon as the rates went up and the inventory started stacking up, a lot of sellers said, oh my gosh, I better get out there. I remember what happened 10, 15 years ago, and I need to get on the market and take advantage of the market. Well, what actually happened is that mentality caused an excessive amount of inventory to hit the market in the spring this year. We had people trying to take advantage of the market, and we had our normal spring inventory. So you see an increase of inventory of 70, 80% over what we had. But the really interesting line to me is that we're selling out of that inventory. In each of the last 2 weeks in Pierce County specifically, and also in Pierce, King, and Snohomish counties, more homes have gone off the market than have gone on the market. So our inventory is going down. And for those folks that are waiting for the bottom of the market, the stats say there are fewer and fewer homes available, which will eventually drive those prices back up. My concern is if there's not enough inventory on the market and the rates come down, like Casey expects them to do, and they should at some point, if there's not enough inventory, I think we're going to get a ton of buyer activity, and that's going to drive the market forward again. And so for those people that have been sitting on the sideline saying, I don't want to overspend, I don't want to buy a house for $150,000 over asking, this window to get in while there's less competition is right now. So The last slide, and then we'll open up for Q&A. This is just a residential market overview. And a couple of things that I want to point out that look a little bit different. So we just touched on the listing inventory available and how the inventory has increased in our marketplace. What I think is really interesting, you can also see our days on market are higher. They've gone from 12 days on market in July of last year to 15 days on market in July of 22. So that represents a 25% increase of days on market. But if you look at the start of the year, beginning of the year, our days on market was more like 5 days, and it was a strategic 5 days, right, Casey? I mean, things are blowing off the shelves. So they're not. So you have a chance to come and have a fair negotiation now. I think it's great for the buyers. But for the people that are really waiting for the market to kind of bottom out, I mean, what we're seeing in the sales statistics is we're still seeing a very healthy sale price. This stat here is percentage of list price received. So a year ago, sellers were getting almost 5.5% more for their home than they were even asking, right? So that would mean $500,000 house is likely selling for $525,000 to $530,000 consistently. What we're seeing now is it's a decline in the amount over asking, but it means right here, this stat of 100.3% of list price received means that the sellers are getting what they're asking. And the key stat for me is, if you boil it all down, the homes are selling in our region on average for $37,000 more, or 4.8% more than they were a year ago. So the prices are still up. The win right now for our buyers is that you can come in and have a fair negotiation because nobody else is at the table. That's a big deal. So,
I think when you look at this and you kind of like put this all out, right, is that if you're going to buy in the next 3 years in any of these markets that we've talked about, Pierce, King, and Snohomish, your next 6 to 12 months is going to be the best time to look at buying, right? Because everything we look at, every economist, right? No one has a crystal ball, it could all hit the storm, but like same time, all the numbers, all the data points, everything they're doing is pointing that rates are going to come down in Q4, right? So inflation is going to peak out in October, which is the November reading. And then from there, you're going to see inflation come back down, maybe 5%, for a while, right? So as that comes down, rates are going to come down. 2023 is going to be a really good rate environment, right? So when you gain 15% this year in the first quarter, that might be, month over month, 10 to 15%, depending on the region you're in, right? They project, again, 5 to 12%, depending on your neighborhood and for 2023, 2024. I think it's going to be the second half of 2023. You're going to see that gain. When rates come down, all these buyers are going to come back in the market. And now, instead of where right now you get to negotiate with a seller, you're going to be competing with buyers again, right? And each house right now still can have multiple offers. If it's priced right, it's a good neighborhood, it's a good house, like you're going to get multiple offers. So honestly, if this is just like what we're trying to do is just educate people, right, on this. It's, again, yes, we have a vested interest because this is what we do for our living, on mortgage and real estate, but use us, use not, doesn't matter. If you're going to buy and you want to buy real estate, do it now before the market changes, because we can get you into a home and then refinance you when rates come down, right? That's what you can do, because I've had buyers get a $10,000 seller credit, a $20,000 seller credit, a below list ask, and negotiating, have inspection, have appraisal contingencies, I haven't seen that since 2017.
Yep.
And you're not going to see it again. When the market changes and the rates come back down, you're going to be having to waive everything, and you're going to be like, oh, I wish I would have bought back then, right? Timing the market, you can never do, right? Timing the real estate, the real estate stock market, crypto market, whatever, you never do. You can never buy low. You can never be high, right? And sell high, these kind of things. The one thing, even Sean kind of mentioned it, but there's, over the last 10 years, the real estate market has done better than the S&P 500. It's the best investment you can do. And that's hands down, data shows it, everything that shows it.
Well, I think the one thing, this is maybe for friends that are listening right now, if you don't own a home, I think it's a little different if you're a real estate investor, right? Like a savvy, seasoned real estate investor. If you don't own a home, the leverage created by buying real estate is tremendous. And if you don't understand that, I think it's a different slide deck, a different time to discuss it. But what actually happens is, let's say you buy a house and, I mean, by the way, you could get a foot in the door with 5% down, 10% down. About 6 months ago, if you didn't have cash, the seller wasn't talking to you. I mean, cold hard cash, right? And so right now, our buyers that have a little bit less money to put down, they can still break into the market. But if you put, like, say, 10% down on a $500,000 house, our average purchase price in Pierce County is a little bit higher than that, but those are easy numbers. Your skin in the game is $50,000. So your investment is $50,000. And Casey, what Casey's talking about is, let's say the market does run on us next year a little bit. We will find out if it does or if it doesn't. But let's say it runs up 10%. The home appreciates 10%, not your $50,000, the $500,000 home that you own. So that $50,000 initial down payment just netted you an additional $50,000, right? You don't use it like a piggy bank, but that's the leverage created with real estate and why it's so important to break into the market at some point. So we're going to open it up for Q&A real quick. Casey, great information. Appreciate you taking the time to help us put the slide deck together and to speak with our network. Guys, you have questions for Casey, or if you want to fire some questions at me, we'll open it up for a couple of minutes. If you want to talk to Casey offline, jot down his contact information. He'd be happy to answer any questions about mortgages. And then I'm happy to answer any questions about real estate or get you connected with our group. Or if anybody else wants to get connected, that's good too. If you have a question, just maybe unmute yourself. We'll just have people jump in. I got some chat here. John, thanks for joining us. See you later. Appreciate it. So if you have a question, maybe just raise your hand. And I'll try to catch you in my view here. Man, I think the group is small enough too. We can just probably unmute our microphones, and if anybody wants to just jump in, go for it. We can have a little coffee talk, and I think that'd be great. If anybody else has anything you want to jump in with.
I mean, I even think questions might not come up now, and that's totally fine. I mean, we went through a lot of information, but really, I think the biggest thing that my team and Nick's team can do is educate the people in the market, right? So if you know someone looking at buying, it's a family member thinking about investing or something like that, forward this on to them, right? Nick will send it out, send it on to people, because again, we want to educate more people on this because there's so much misinformation in the marketplace and the media, right? And the more we can educate, the more we can bring light to these issues and educate people, the better off we're all going to be, right? Homeowners, renters, all these kind of things. And so I think this is just how many people can we touch on this? How many people can we educate on it? And I think that's the power of people here. So.
Well, and I would just say that for people that are watching and our friends that are with us today, at the end of the day, we tell every one of our clients, you don't need to remember all of this stuff. You just need to find somebody who knows what they're doing, who's got your back and your best interest at heart. Don't try to go at it alone. If you want to make a purchase or you want to make an investment, call the people that you trust, sit down with them and come up with a game plan to decide if it's the right time to go forward or not. I have a lot of clients that kind of try to wait to have that initial conversation. And I find that it just gets chaotic because of the craziness in the headlines and what mom said and dad said. And they're not the boots on the ground perspective. They can't give you information that we can share with you like we did today. So if somebody's thinking about making that first step forward, you call your trusted advisors, you can call us, you can call somebody else, but you talk about issues like this, you talk about the state of the market, you talk about what your goals are, and you sit down and put a game plan together and decide, is this the market for me to be working in, right? That's a really important conversation to have. And you've got to find somebody you can trust fully. And once you find that person, you go back to them. And whenever you want to do something, you bounce those ideas off of them rather than just reading article after article after article. I did that when I bought my first house. It drove me crazy. I had no idea what I was doing. I knew just enough to be totally dangerous, which was not very much. But I have survived. Well, I don't see a lot of other hands going up today. which is perfectly fine. Hope you guys got some great information. If you're watching right now, we've got a big block party to welcome ourselves to the new neighborhood coming up on September 15th. So if you're in the Tacoma area or you want to visit Tacoma, we're going to party it up and have a barbecue outside of our office at 26th and Alder in the Proctor District. If you have any questions that we can help with, reach out to us. We would love to connect with you. Casey, appreciate you joining us. And guys, we're going to shut the Zoom down. Look forward to answering any questions that you have if you want to ask them offline. Thanks again. See ya.
Thank you guys. Bye.
Thanks. I didn't have any questions. It was a lot of information,
No
but
problem,
I
no
did want
problem.
to say thank you. So,
Awesome. My pleasure, Kevin. We'll talk to
Okay.
you, buddy.
yeah, bye.